You think silence is weakness until you see what it does to people who depend on your reactions. The moment you stop reacting, something strange starts happening around you, and most people never notice it early enough. This is not about being cold or detached. It is about becoming unreadable in a world that feeds on predictable emotion. Every reaction you give away is information, and people use that information to control how you feel and respond. When you always explain yourself, you are not communicating, you are negotiating your position in someone else's mind. And every negotiation invites resistance, even from people who were never against you in the first place. Stop explaining, and you remove the need for others to agree with your version of events. That is where the shift begins, not in what you say, but in what you refuse to justify. People are comfortable when they can predict your reactions, because prediction makes them feel in control. The second you break that pattern, their behavior starts adjusting in ways they cannot explain. They may act more intense, more distant, or more confused, but it is all a response to uncertainty. And uncertainty is what people try hardest to eliminate when they feel they are losing control. Silence forces people to interpret you without guidance, and that interpretation is rarely comfortable. This is why silence feels powerful, because it removes the script others were relying on. When the script disappears, people start filling the gaps with their own assumptions and fears. You are no longer reacting, so they are forced to reveal themselves instead. And when people cannot read you, they start overthinking every small interaction you have ever had. You do not fight for control directly, you simply stop feeding the emotional system that others rely on. Your lack of reaction becomes a mirror, and people start seeing their own behavior reflected back at them. This realization is what creates panic beneath the surface of their behavior. Internal disruption shows through shifting tone. You are not actively doing anything, but your consistency is reshaping their perception of control. Absence is difficult to interpret, which is why people often misread it as threat or rejection. At this stage, your silence is no longer passive. It becomes an active force in their thinking. You are no longer explaining yourself, so people begin constructing explanations that suit their feelings. This is where emotional distance begins to feel like emotional significance. You are not chasing attention, but attention starts chasing understanding of you. This mental looping is what turns absence into psychological presence. They cannot argue with it, because there is nothing explicit to respond to. You are no longer reacting, so they start reacting to themselves. This is where people begin to feel your influence even when you are not visible. Silence becomes a psychological amplifier. It turns minor moments into major emotional triggers. You are no longer a participant in the conversation, but a variable inside it. The less predictable you become, the more mentally occupied others become. You remain still, while everything around you adjusts to your stillness. They expected reaction, but received silence, and that gap changes everything. You are no longer explaining, reacting, or defending, and in that final shift, you become harder to replace in their mind. Once that shift begins, it doesn't stop, it builds, quietly at first, then faster, then all at once. Because the moment you step out of the pattern, the other person doesn't just notice. They feel it, and that feeling doesn't fade. It intensifies, because the mind isn't designed to sit with uncertainty. It's designed to resolve it, to close the gap, to restore what feels stable and predictable. But when you don't give it anything to work with, it starts turning inward, trying to create answers where there are none. At first, it looks like curiosity, a simple question, a passing thought, something that feels small. But that thought doesn't pass. It stays, because it never gets answered. So it repeats. They check their phone again. They revisit the last message. They replay your tone, your words, your timing. Trying to pinpoint the exact moment something changed, trying to find something that explains the shift. But nothing lines up. Nothing feels clear, and that lack of clarity is what keeps them stuck. Because the mind doesn't let go of what it doesn't understand. It holds onto it. It circles around it. It keeps coming back, and every time it comes back, the feeling gets stronger. That's when curiosity turns into focus, because now they're paying attention in a way they didn't before. Not casually, not out of habit, but with intention. They start noticing everything. The way you respond or don't respond. The time you take, the silence between moments, and every small detail feels amplified, because their mind is searching for something to anchor to, something that makes sense again. But it can't find it, because you've removed the pattern they relied on, And without that pattern, there's nothing stable to hold on to. That's when tension begins to build, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, beneath the surface. A subtle pressure that grows the longer it goes unresolved. At first, they try to ignore it. They tell themselves it doesn't matter, that they're overthinking, that it's nothing. But the feeling doesn't go away because it isn't coming from logic. It's coming from uncertainty. And uncertainty doesn't disappear without resolution. So it stays, it lingers, it grows. And the more it grows, the more it pulls their attention back to you. Again and again and again. Because now, it's not just a thought, it's a loop. They think about what you're doing, what you're thinking, why you changed, why something feels different. And every time they try to answer those questions, they come back to the same place. No answer, no clarity, no resolution, just silence. And that silence becomes the center of their attention. Not because it's loud, but because it's empty. And the mind hates emptiness. It tries to fill it. With assumptions, with possibilities, with imagined scenarios. And most of those scenarios aren't calm. They're emotional, they're uncertain. They're driven by the need to understand something that no longer makes sense. That's when focus turns into something stronger, something harder to control, obsession. Because now, they're not just thinking about you occasionally. They're thinking about you repeatedly, compulsively, without choosing to, because the loop hasn't been closed. And until it is, their mind keeps returning to it, trying to solve it, trying to end it, trying to regain the control they lost. That's when behavior starts to change. Subtly at first, then more noticeably. They check more often. They look for signs. They pay attention in ways they didn't before. Not because they want to, but because they can't stop. Because you created something unresolved. And unresolved things demand attention. That's when they start reaching out. Testing the silence, looking for a reaction. Any reaction that brings things back to normal. But when nothing comes, that's when the intensity increases. Because now, the silence isn't just confusing, it's consuming. It takes up space in their thoughts. It interrupts their focus. It pulls their attention away from everything else. Back to you. Again and again. Because you've become the one thing they can't figure out, and what the mind can't figure out. It doesn't let go of. It holds on to it. It obsesses over it. It keeps returning to it until it finds resolution. But there is no resolution. Not from you. Because you didn't fill the silence. You didn't explain the change. You didn't give them something to settle on. So the loop stays open, and the longer it stays open, the stronger it becomes. That's when the real shift happens, because now it's no longer about you. It's about how they feel, and how they feel is out of control. That's the part most people miss. You didn't take control by doing more. You didn't force anything. You didn't manipulate anything, you simply removed yourself from the pattern. And in doing that, you removed the stability they relied on. So now, they're the ones reacting. They're the ones overthinking. They're the ones trying to fix something they can't control. Because control only exists when things are predictable. And you're no longer predictable. That's what makes the difference. Not silence alone, but silence without explanation. Silence without reassurance. Silence that doesn't resolve itself. Because that kind of silence creates tension that doesn't go away. It builds, it stretches, it lingers. And the longer it lingers is the longer it lingers. The more it shapes how they feel. That's when they start revealing themselves. Without realizing it, their reactions become stronger. Their behavior becomes more obvious because they're trying to get something back. Clarity, control, certainty. But the more they try, the more they expose how much they need it. That's the hidden shift. The one most people never see. Because it doesn't happen in what you do, it happens in what they start doing. They become more reactive, more emotional, more focused on you. Because you became the one variable they can't solve, and that makes you impossible to ignore. But this is where most people fail. They see the shift happening. They feel the attention increasing, and they break. They respond, they explain, they close the gap, and the moment they do, everything resets. The tension disappears. The loop closes, the mind relaxes. And just like that, the obsession fades. Because it was never about you doing more, it was about what you weren't doing. And the moment you go back, you give them exactly what they needed to regain control. That's why holding the silence matters. Not for a moment, but long enough for the shift to complete. Long enough for the pattern to fully break. long enough for their mind to stop expecting resolution. Because when that happens, something deeper changes. You stop being predictable entirely, not just in one moment, but as a pattern. And when that happens, you become something rare, something the mind doesn't encounter often. Someone it can't map, someone it can't read, someone it can't control. And that's what makes the effect last, because now it's not tied to one interaction, it's tied to how they see you. And once that perception shifts, it doesn't easily go back, because the mind remembers what it couldn't solve. It remembers what disrupted its certainty. It remembers what made it feel out of control, and it keeps returning to it. That's the real power of disappearing. It doesn't force attention. It creates it. It doesn't demand control. It removes what allowed control to exist. And in doing that, it shifts everything beneath the surface, without effort, without explanation, without saying a word. And once you understand that, you stop trying to be understood. You stop trying to explain yourself. You stop trying to control how others see you, because you realize something most people never do. The less you give, the more they feel. And the more they feel, the less control they have. And once that happens, everything changes, even if you never say a word. When you embrace Stoicism, you learn that life is not about controlling external events, but about mastering your own mind. And yet, many people struggle to apply these principles in the chaos of daily life. Thoughts run wild, emotions flare, and distractions constantly pull your attention away from what truly matters. That is exactly why subscribing to this channel is more than a simple click it, is a commitment to your own practice. Here, we don't just talk about Stoicism. We show you how to live it, step by step, until it becomes instinct. Imagine waking each day with the clarity that nothing outside your control can disturb your inner calm. Imagine facing challenges without panic, without overthinking, without reacting impulsively. This is the essence of Stoicism. Learning to see what you can control and letting go of what you cannot. But knowledge alone is not enough. You need constant reinforcement, reminders that guide you back when the world's chaos threatens. That is exactly what subscribing to this channel provides. Every lesson is designed to strengthen your resilience. Consider the moments when you are frustrated by other people, by circumstances, by expectations. Stoicism teaches that these frustrations are not caused by events themselves, but by your judgments of them. By following our content regularly, you create a mental habit loop. You see these principles applied, repeated, and reinforced. Stoicism is not about suppressing emotions. It is about understanding them and responding with intention. We show you how to pause before reacting, how to examine your impulses, how to choose thought over emotion. Every day, life presents small tests. A Stoic faces them with deliberate composure and careful observation. Consider the principle of amore fati, the love of fate. A Stoic embraces everything that happens as an opportunity for growth. Stoicism also emphasizes perspective. Many people suffer because they magnify the significance of events. Daily practice is the key. True mastery comes from repetition, from reinforcement, and from consistent application. This channel is designed as that daily practice. By subscribing, you are actively participating in your own transformation. People encounter triggers constantly: criticism, failure, disappointment. Stoicism teaches that these are opportunities for mastery. Another critical aspect is reflection. A Stoic constantly evaluates their own actions, thoughts, and habits. Stoicism also emphasizes control over desire. By understanding impulses and practicing restraint, you gain freedom. In essence, subscribing is a commitment to yourself, a promise to integrate Stoicism into every aspect of life. Even when challenges escalate, the Stoic practices you develop here hold steady. Your calm presence becomes a tool. Subscribing ensures that you never lose touch with these lessons, so that Stoicism becomes a lived reality rather than a philosophy.